In this episode of the Slambretta build, I'm going to try and stuff all this air ride gear, that's the air tank, controls, compressor, into the leg shield toolbox. But I'd like the tank to fit in that half of the toolbox. I can't quite fit it in at the moment. It's going to have to go in first and then the toolbox over the top of it, but that will go on the right side. And then I'm hoping the compressor will come on this side in the bottom left. And then the controls I want to sort of mount there. So I'll be able to close the toolbox door. They'll all be hidden, protected from the weather. And I might have to do a little stay so the toolbox door just, you know, pokes out a little bit from when I'm actually riding down the road. Not quite sure yet. And what I'm planning to do is to make a bracket that holds these main components together, which will be independent of the leg shields and the toolbox. We'll have to wrap round this part of the leg shields, and then I'll be able to attach the compressor to the bracket that side. I'll redo the tabs probably on the air tank. That'll connect to the bracket here, and then I'll have the bracket continue up there, and I'll be able to mount the controls. Just measuring across 90 or 100 mil. So I'm thinking I might cut down a piece of box section. It's a 100 mil box section. It gives me about 90 mil internally. So that I'll cut that down either side. That will span across that part of the leg shields. And this bracket actually came with the Harley Davidson shop kit, if you like, which is obviously designed to go on the rear of a Harley Davidson. So I'm not sure what any of these holes do. They obviously mount to the Harley Davidson frame somehow. But these are the mounts here for the compressor. So I should probably just chop this mount off, weld this to there. Hopefully it's all going to make sense when I start doing it. And then I'll need to make another leg off here to attach the air tank. But first of all, I'm going to cut this bit of box section down and just see if we can get that fitting tightly around the leg shields. Yeah, the idea is it just sits in there, and I weld some wings on, if you like, to take the compressor and air tank. Well, I think what I'm going to do is just mark on the inside where this toolbox sits with a Sharpie. If you can see that, I'm just going to go all the way around and just take this toolbox off, because it's just getting in my way a bit, really. I can't measure the length of the tabs, if you like, to pick up these other bits. The outline of the toolbox there, the start of the bracket I think will be there, and this basically just needs to go as tight to it as possible, so I just need to measure that there. This is the bracket which is going to hold the compressor, something like that, and then this bit I've just cut out just needs to be as tight as possible to it. So I think I'm just going to mark this bracket here, chop it off there. I'll chop it off just this side here as well. There's no need for it to stick out there. I'll offer it up onto leg shields and just tack those two together, I think. Just tacked this part onto here temporarily. I will bolt that on eventually, and then I tacked that bracket onto there with the compressor there, and I'm just going to offer up this and just check it's all clearing. Plenty of clearance there. Next stage is I'm going to weld a tab out there so I can mount that big air tank there, hopefully. This needed to move to the right slightly for a couple of reasons. One of them is when this lid was on, it was touching there, so yeah, I offered up the toolbox, realised that, so I've shoved it over a little bit. Now I know this all looks a bit wonky, I just had to try and tack it with the toolbox in place, so it's a bit of a mess, but I'll clean all this up and I'll sort of square off all these angles, etc. But anyway, that fits inside now. I mean, the tolerances are so small, just like a millimetre gap around, but that's pretty good. So next I want to come up and get some brackets to attach the controls. So these controls again, the other reason for moving this tank over as well, because these controls need to be central, so before it's hitting the pipes, so that's going to come around there somewhere. Just cut a couple of bits of angle iron. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm just going to weld one of those on either side. And then that should pick up points on the controls there. Not 100% sure it's going to work. Let's tack those on and fit the toolbox and see how it's looking. Bracket's starting to take shape. I've got these bits welded on and I drilled a couple of holes here. I'm going to cut these down to suit, but yeah, those holes are going to mount there somewhere, so I'm just marking on this control unit, where to drill the holes to match here. And yeah, it's getting there. It needs a bit of tidying up. This side takes the compressor, so I've just welded these on to make it much easier, and this is where the bowl welds on there. I might actually add another leg here to give it a bit more support. Just quickly bolted that up to these brackets, and what I'm going to do next is put the toolbox door back on the toolbox and just check that the lock in here doesn't hit anything. The toolbox itself is fine, but as you can see, the catch for the toolbox does stick down. Just got the toolbox roughly in place, held in position by my knee, and it's a good job I checked, because yeah, this lock is indeed hitting. In fact, I think I've even managed to scratch the lens a little bit. So just put a bit of tape on here just to protect them, but what's happening is, if you can see in there, with the lock in that position, yeah, it just touches those. I can kind of force it up a bit, but yeah, this is gonna have to go down just a little bit, 10-15 mil maybe, and then it should clear. So yeah, I'm going to take this back out again and just drop that down a little bit more. Okay, take two. This is mounted a little bit lower and pretty good. Clears, probably giving it a bit too much space to be honest, but anyway, it's good there. A little bit lower as well means I can get my fingers on the paddles a bit easier, so I think we're good. So I think I'm just going to pull this off a bit now and just finish welding up this bracket, chop these bits off, make them look a bit prettier. super pleased with how this is turning out. The bracket's looking good. I mean, you won't even see it when everything's bolted in finally. Yeah, I've rounded off the edges there. Everything's super tight tolerance, so the air tank is just 1 mil away from this control panel. I even had to notch out the control panel just slightly on that corner. The compressor's in there, super tight against the bracket, and the toolbox itself just fits on. There's like 1 mil gap around everywhere. But it's looking really good, and the next thing I need to do is turn my attention to the air tank itself. You may notice that I cut the bung off the front there, which it came with, because that was fouling on the toolbox, so I need to weld a little whatever washer or something in there just to seal that up, and then I need to add a couple of bungs. So I've got this pressure switch here which will switch the compressor off when it gets a certain pressure, so I'm thinking about welding a bung into the air tank there, so the switch is going to go there, nicely tucked out of the way. And I'm going to try and be a bit sneaky, and the air line from the compressor to the air tank I'm going to try and squeeze in behind this control panel. I just want to keep everything compact as possible, so that's going to go there. So it means I need to weld another bung into the top of that air tank in exactly the right place. So I think next job I'm going to pull the air tank off at least, and yeah, I'm going to try myself to weld these bungs in. Just, you know, obviously the whole thing needs to be airtight at the end of the day, so I guess I'll just keep welding until I get rid of any pinhole, and yeah, see how we get on with that. Got my 2 holes drilled, 20 mil I think that was. These are about 19 mil bung, so one there, one there. I know it looks kind of odd, but this is pretty bespoke to the thing I'm doing with it, of course. This bracket tab needs a bit more weld as well, so yeah, I'll put a time lapse on again and try and weld these. I'm not going for pretty on these welds, I'm going for, yeah, stopping air leaks. So let's see how we get on. Right, just going to give this bracket a little dusting of primer before we fit it, just to stop, I mean it's not going to flash rust stuff in here, but yeah, I just want it to look a bit nicer anyway, so here we go. And there we have it, the finished bracket. Well, I think it's pretty much finished. I might have to add a tab or two to hold these electrics eventually, but I'm not quite sure how the electrics are going to go, whether I'm going to house those at the back of the scooter or in the toolbox. And I don't know if it looks like much on camera or not, but yeah, I know. It does a job. It's going to be pretty much hidden by the time I bolt everything onto it. I've ended up kind of welding all these bolts, if you like, from the back, just to try and make it easy to install, because it's going to be such a tight space within that toolbox. So I've made it so you can mount the bracket, then mount the compressor, then mount the air tank, etc. The only thing I might mount before I fit this on is the control, because it's a little bit fiddly to mount to the top of the bracket there. And I've made everything, is it M6 I think, studs or bolts if you like, so everything has a 10 mil nut. So you just pretty much need one spanner and you can fit everything to this bracket, just trying to make my life a little bit easier. I've even welded the studs to the leg shields here, so they're welded from the front of the leg shields, so this bracket just clips on there. I'll get you a little close-up of that in a minute. I'm going to mount this control panel first, and then yeah, we'll do it bit by bit, and then we'll try and hook everything up and see if we can get the thing to work. I'm not sure if I'm missing a fitting or two, but let's see how far we get. Control panel fitted to bracket, just a couple of screws in there. Now we can fit the actual bracket onto the leg shields. What I'll probably do on final fit up is put a couple of rubber washers behind the bracket, obviously just to save the paintwork a bit, but obviously I'm not too worried about it at the moment. So next we're going to fit the compressor. This has got a couple of rubber kind of isolator pads which fit nicely on the bracket there. And then, yeah, I can slap the compressor on. I have managed to lose the nuts for that. They're, like I say, just 10mm nuts, but I've got a couple of squares here. Not sure where I've put those. Last to go on the bracket is the air tank. Now don't look too closely at these welds. I need to do a bit of dressing and finishing off, but I went really overboard with the welds. Just put massive, great big welds around these bungs that I welded on. And yeah, that's the one I welded up. So I put like a washer type thing in there, welded over that, ground it all flat. That's the front. It's going to sit like that. Like I say, I want to get this thing tested first before I tidy up all these welds and paint the thing, because if there's any pinholes I can just go back and fill the pinholes. But that is the air tank, and next I need to, well, I'm going to blow it out first because it is absolutely full of metal shavings from where I've been grinding and welding. And then we got fittings to go on there first. So this is like a safety valve fitting which will go on the top. I'm going to get some PTFE tape or plumber's tape or whatever it's called and put that on before I tighten these up. I think on the final assembly they recommend using like a liquid sealant as opposed to the tape, but the tape will be alright for now for testing. So that one goes on the top. I've got like a drain valve because what happens is moisture builds up in these air ride systems. I mean, this is all new to me, but I've been doing a bit of research, and after a while, yeah, condensation, whatever. Every now and then this tap at the bottom will just allow me to drain any moisture that builds up in the tank there. This one I need to block off. That was the original one, and these are actually a BSP thread, and I have got a gauge which I might run at some later point which will fit in there, but these ones are MPT thread, the bungs that I've welded in, so these will accept my air in and out, and also my switch, the pressure switch, which I'm just looking for, but it's around here somewhere. So I'm going to get all those screwed in, PTFE tape everything, get them screwed in nice and tight. Here's the air tank with the fittings. I've had to try and bodge this block off one with a fitting. I've rammed some plastic in there and put another fitting on top. Hopefully it's going to hold. That's my air in and out. Yeah, the switch, pressure switch. So all the fittings are on there. I can chuck this on here now. So that's all the components bolted on. Next I want to run an air line from the compressor there to the air tank, and that'll also, I'm going to tee off and come to the controls here, and then this control, oh sorry, this outlet goes to the rear airbag, and this one goes to the front. So the other thing I mentioned earlier about waiting for fittings, the fitting out of this compressor is a tiny little thing, because originally this was designed just to go directly to the front air shocks, so got a tiny little fitting there. So I'm going to have to run this adapter So that'll take it from that small airline to the bigger airline. Eventually I'll replace this fitting just to, you know, avoid using all these adapters. And then I've got my tee off there, so it's going to be a bit fiddly. Going to have lots of little bits of pipe at the moment, but eventually I'll replace all that, but just for now. I need a tiny bit of this thin pipe just to go from this adapter to the compressor. Just going to snip it off. And we can plug that then into there. I've gone from that adapter to the T. Now I need a little bit between the two T's. I'm not worried too much about this being super accurate because I shall redo all this when I get the proper fittings. Yeah, unfortunately with that, the wrong fitting there, I'm going to have to make a bit of a loop here. So if you can see what's going on here, got the compressor here with the adapter from small to big. The big goes into this T there, T drops down to go to the controls, and then the other pipe goes to this fitting into the air tank. Now I need actually a straight out fitting, but I've only got this angle one, so there's a big silly loop here, but eventually it'll just go straight from this T right across. Super nice, simple. And then this goes to the front air shocks, so that's why there's an adapter there from big to small. That's the front air shocks connected in there, and then this line is for the rear air shocks, and that goes into there. It's all push fit obviously. So that is all the pipe work connected. Next I'm going to try and wire this puppy up. The compressor's just got a positive and a sad wire. I've got a little fuse here which I'll, you know, just temporarily put in place as well for now, just in case I try and blow the thing up. Got a relay as well, which is fairly simple. I've actually sort of pre-marked where these go to ground. One goes to the battery, one other goes to compressor, but that's going to go via the pressure cut-off switch, if you see what I mean. It's fairly simple. I've got an old car battery as well, which is like years old and it's not been charged for years. I've just got that on boil right now. It may not work. I might have to nip out and either steal one off my car or nip to Halfords and get the finer battery I'm going to use with the system, but I'm just desperate to see if this thing is all going to work together. So yeah, bear with me. I'm just going to crimp on a few connections, use a bit of electrical tape and just jerry rig something together, just see if we can fire this puppy up. I've got the relay wired in and that switch. Not sure if that switch is the right way around or not, but and I've just got the jump leads from the massive battery. So just try and put this somewhere it's not going to touch each other. That's the happy cable and this is the sad cable. And with a bit of luck, this should fire into life. Oh yeah. So that's the compressor going. Oh! Gonna have a listen for any leaks. Oh. Right, well I found a leak already. There's a massive leak in this hole I welded up. Let me just see if I can stick some weld on there and then we'll go again. Let's see if that's going to work. Whoa! Let's stop that leak. I think. Oh, I can still hear air coming from somewhere. Is it this one? The good news is I've put a massive lump of weld on here and that stopped that leak. The bad news is both my bungs are leaking. I've just been spraying some stuff on there. And I think there's another big air leak from somewhere as well. One of these pipes is not quite pushed in, but first I need to get rid of the air leaks from my weld. So I'm going to have to pull this off again, and I think just go over the welds that we've done around those bungs. I mean, it's going to look a right mess, but yeah, what can you do? So yeah, bear with me. I'm going to pull this air bottle back off again and take the pressure out of it first. And yeah, let's weld those up again. So if you didn't realise with that terrible movie pastiche, I actually ruined this air tank. I was chasing those pinhole air leaks for about 4 hours, and just weld on top of weld, air tank bit the dust, and you may be wondering why it's cut in half. Well, it didn't quite go to waste. So this is now about a week later, and I ordered another air tank, and that is here. And this time it's a nice shiny stainless steel one. And I actually managed to find an air tank with the bungs in almost exactly the right place. And it's actually slightly narrower, although it's slightly longer than the other air tank. It'll help a little bit with clearance width-wise, but I'm just gonna have to watch with this valve on top that I fitted and the drain plug on the bottom. Just, you know, hopefully it's going to still fit in there. It's going to be tight. I also, well, I ordered some new fittings for it, but I ordered this gauge, only quite a cheap gauge here, but when I was trying to fill the other air tank, I had no idea of what air pressure was going into the tank. So with this gauge fitted, and that'll be a permanent fixture, at least I can see when the compressor's kicked on what the air pressure is, and also I can check that this air pressure switch here is, you know, switching it off at the right pressure. So I cut the old air tank basically in half. I cut a big section out of it, and I used that to make a bracket, which is here. So yeah, this is literally a section from that old air tank, and I welded a couple of flanges, I don't know what you want to call it, on there, and a bolt, so it'll clamp tight together. And I welded a bracket which will, you know, bolt onto the bracket on the leg shields there. But if you remember, I said this one was slightly wider than the new air tank, so that means that is perfect, and it just about fits around that. The other beauty about having a separate bracket here, it allows me to put this in here and orientate the new air tank, so I can bolt it up there. Once the toolbox cover surround is in place, I can actually orientate this exactly to where I want it, and then I'll just, the bolt obviously clamps it down, I'll just tighten it up, and yeah, it shouldn't go anywhere. So with all that said, let's bolt the new air tank on and yeah, see how we get on. You can see a bit more now how this bracket works. I just tighten out in position. It needs a bit of tweaking because I welded this bracket up on the bench, so yeah, it's a bit, needs tilting back a little bit, but I can adjust that later. And also it needs twisting round so we can go straight shot basically, but at the moment if I do that, it pushes the gauge. Anyway, everything needs a little bit of tweaking. Yeah, and I know it looks like a bomb.
A bomb?
No, not a bomb.
Okay, we're ready to give this another test, and the way it should work is the compressor should kick on when I connect up to this car battery here, and the way it's wired is this switch should then cut off the compressor when it gets to around, I think it's 120 psi, and then when it drops to 90 it kicks back on. So that's the way I'm hoping it's all going to work, but let's just fire it up anyway and just see if we can build up some pressure in this thing first before we even test the bags or anything. Just checking for air leaks and all that kind of thing. Right, here we go. Good so far. So you can see there, the air pressure's building. So that's working well. You can see there, yeah, it's about 120 psi, so that switch has cut that off now, and that is all pressurized, and I'm just listening for any air leaks. Obviously that will, if there is an air leak, that will start dropping in pressure, but I think that is good to go. So next we should be able to air up the airbags, and like I say, when that drops below 90, that the compressor will kick in again. So what's happened there is it's obviously let some air into the system and into the airbag. The airbag hasn't really started to rise, but obviously this tank isn't massive, so it's probably roughly the same sort of capacity as the airbag in the back, so it obviously just needs to let some air into the system before it even lifts it. And now it should come up, I hope. Yeah, right, it's starting to lift there. So, and the front, yeah, cool. Let me just make sure everything's tied down before we do a proper test of this. I'm terrified, but I should be able to let this back out again. Cool. Okay, let's give this a test. I'm just going to sit on this partly just to make sure the thing doesn't topple over, but I should be able to go up with the back now. I'll bring you in a second, but that is reading about 80 psi on the back, and we got about 40 on the front. Here we go on board. So you can see the pressure's up to 120 psi for the compressor there. There's already a bit of pressure because that's the back bag there, but once I go up, this should then bring up the back. Now I should be able to go at the front. This doesn't take as much pressure, yeah, see that goes. Those front air bags don't take a lot at all, and it doesn't even kick the compressor back on them. And then I can just let the pressure out on the back. It goes all the way down. I've just taken you back a little bit, you can see what's going on a bit more now. Let's give this a go. So the compressor's up to its 120 psi. And I think it will cut in once this back airbag takes some air, but let's just see what we can do here. So let's go up with the front first maybe. Cool. Back. Back all the way down. Ooh, cool. And that's about as far as I'm going to get on this episode, but super pleased to get that installed there, the air ride system. It's by no means finished, there's some tweaks to do. I've got a feeling that the output from the compressor, because it's only a tiny, I think 1/8 whatever, it's not filling up the tank very fast. That compressor was only designed to basically feed those two little front shocks, which are tiny, and the airline was tiny. So it's now trying to run the whole system here. So I need to get another bigger outlet connector from the compressor, and we'll see if that's going to help to start with. And I just need to tweak the bracketry a little bit as well. Obviously tidy up all the wiring, but it's in place now. And yeah, I just wanted to get all that done before I move on to the next stage, really, just to know the air ride system is all kind of working and how I kind of thought it was going to be in my head. And I just want to thank you all for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Give us a like, leave us a comment down below. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram, and we have merchandise for sale. I'll put links below. The Slambretta t-shirts are pretty much sold out of most sizes, and I'm thinking I will need to get those repressed, but you can pre-order now. So yeah, click on that link, pre-order, and I'll get some made up fairly soon and get them shipped off to you. I think there's 1 or 2 waiting there. I think the large size sold out first, so there's a few of you waiting for those. And yeah, see you on the next one. Cheers.